We're delighted to be joined this week for a discussion with Miriam Shaded, a well-known entrepreneur, human rights activist and political campaigner in Poland. Miriam has been for many years an active defender of women's rights, especially in the context of the challenges many women of the Islamic faith face. She is the founder and president of the Fundacja Estera, which was responsible in 2015 for the evacuation and resettlement in Poland of dozens of Christian refugees from Syria. Miriam's own family is of Syrian ancestry, so given the recent overthrow of the Bashar al-Assad regime, this interview comes at a particularly opportune time. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Miriam.
Thank you for inviting me.
Are you speaking to?
Hello to everybody.
Are you speaking to us from Warsaw?
Actually, yes, I'm speaking from Warsaw. So.
And is the weather in Warsaw very cold this time of year? I'm guessing it is.
It is. It's freezing at the moment. I prefer the Syrian weather than the Polish one, but yeah.
Well, in Ireland, we mainly just have wind and rain all times of the year. So yeah, we're probably better and worse. I suppose to begin with, would you like to tell our listeners in Ireland, and this website is primarily focused on the Polish community in Ireland, who may be unfamiliar with your background to date, a little about yourself and your work.
Okay, so as you said, I'm the founder of Foundation Estera. I helped to implement the precedents in Europe, which is the legal migration. It was through my foundation. That was the first time that ever there was such a huge case of bringing specific persecuted people direct from Syria to Poland in a legal way. So it was like a huge case. It was a huge case in Europe and Poland. And that's why, I sat with all the ministers and talked through how we can do it legally. And that's how we managed to help. And my dad is a Syrian pastor. My mom is from Poland. So I was born and raised in Poland.
Very good. And seeing that you mentioned the topic of migration, and you obviously emphasized that it was legal migration in the case of your foundation, migration is very much a hot topic throughout Europe at the present time. What challenges do you believe migration presents at the present time to Europe, especially migration from particular geographies? In Ireland, obviously, we become much more familiar with large number of migrants due to the conflict in Ukraine and other developments, but I know it's not just Ukraine and a lot of mainland Europe.
Yeah, but the Ukrainians are still a Christian country, so they're a bit more safer than the migrants that come from Africa and Islamic regions. The case is that the migrants who come from the Muslim regions pose a threat to the society, and I guess this is the biggest issue, because most of them you don't know who they are, because they would put their documents away, just throw it away, and like have fun finding who am I, and deal with it, going to the authorities, European authorities. So I feel like there's a huge incompetence with dealing with the migration topic.
So there's a lack of effective controls, effectively, is what you would say.
Again?
A lack of effective controls in terms of measures to ensure that migration is legal.
Yeah, it should be legal. If you allow to cross the boundaries, well, in this particular case, real boundaries or even other boundaries, many times, of course, they're going to be crossed. And if you stop letting people cross the boundaries, then it's going to be much harder for them, and they might not want to do it anymore, because it won't be an effective way of dealing.
And I suppose as well as a question of how to integrate new communities and societies, and some migrants may have more difficult challenges integrating in a different society than others, depending on, as you say, their cultural background.
Yes, of course. So Ukrainians have much more easy way to integrate because they're still Christians. They are still like in Europe, but with the Muslim migration, it's totally different. Their law is basically based on religion.
Mm.
They would prefer to implement their religious law in Europe, and which is a huge threat for the European civilization because the law that they want to enforce is like a totalitarian system, but much worse than we actually have over here.
And are there different kind of, depending on different sectors of the Muslim community who arrive as migrants? I know there's a very big difference, say, between certain Muslim countries and issues like the rights of women, what opportunities they have. Are there the kind of the shades of grey in terms of what particular challenges there are depending on what particular group is concerned or what particular country is concerned? Or do you believe it's something kind of specific to Islam as a whole?
I think it depends what kind of. It all depends on the religion.
Mm.
Basically, because if there's like Al Qaeda and Al Qaeda terrorists, so it's a different group, and Sunnis groups are different. Like Alawis are like non-believing Muslims, so it's a bit different from countries that are more from Russian influences. It was like division of religion and the government. So it is a bit different, and of course it's different communities within the Christian communities and the minorities. So,
It's an interesting topic, and I'm just wondering, because I wouldn't claim to be any expert on the Muslim faith, but what do you think is at the root of, in particular, the difficulties in terms of respect for women among certain adherents? Where does it come from theologically, or in terms of the structure of the faith, do you think?
First of all, Muslims think, because as it's written in the Quran, that they can beat up women and they can rape them. And if they follow Muhammad, so Muhammad had took a 60-year-old wife, a girl, his wife, and he had sex with her with tightening sex, and then with pedophilic sex when she was 9. So if you have those kind of people migrating to Europe, it poses a huge threat to, of course, to children, to women. You know, because if they marry a 60-year-old, then of course they when they read the Quran that they should abuse the woman, they abuse the woman as they would abuse a child. And the other cases, a huge thing that nobody is talking about, I don't see anybody is talking about, is female genital mutilation. We have now about 300 million women who's female genital mutilated. We have that in Europe, and we should always remember that this specific religion is torturing. It's really harshly abusing women. If somebody would allow this to happen to their daughter, you cannot think that it's a good religion. It's always better for them to be somewhere else than within the community that allows to cut your most intimate part off.
Yeah. No, it's an absolutely shocking abuse of people's human rights in terms of female genital mutilation, certainly.
It's 300 million.
Yeah.
300 million in the Muslim community. 300 million. So if at least 50%. And when you look at Iran, the age of consent in Iran is 0, so they can actually rape babies.
This is Iran you're referring to, yes?
Yeah.
Iran. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and going back to Syria now.
Yeah. So in terms of your own ancestry kind of from Syria, you obviously have a deep affinity with Syria and its heritage and background. Would you like to tell our listeners maybe a bit about the country, what it's like in terms of your knowledge and experience of it, and then give us an idea of what your view is of the current developments? The Hafez al-Assad was in power for decades. He was succeeded by his son Bashar al-Assad. They've ruled effectively since 1970, 1971. And I think it's generally accepted that they're one of the most brutal and tyrannical regimes the world has probably ever seen. Would that be a perspective you'd agree with, or just give us your take on Syria in general?
I'll give it a take on. Before his father would implement women's rights in Syria, so he would let women to vote. So he's not like all a dark person, as would everybody assume. The other cases when Bashar al-Assad was in the power, he was the minority as an Alawi. The Alawis would believe in reincarnation. They actually weren't Shi'i community. They just kind of put them under it so they could have power within because of the constitution, and nobody else through the Muslim community can take over the power in Syria. So they had to put somebody who was kind of still is. You can say that they're Muslim, but they weren't.
So are the Alawites like a kind of a subgroup within the Muslim faith overall, like a minority sect? Is that what they're like?
Minority sect, which was treated as the lowest of the low for all the Muslims. And the cases that, the Alawis would cooperate with Russians before the war, and with Russia, when there's communists, there's the division of religion and the division of power within the country. So before the war, Syria was the most liberal state of all the states that were. Women could dress as they wanted. They were in power. They were, the Christians were in the government. So you can see that Syria was a very beautiful country comparing to other Muslim countries that didn't have so much freedom within.
Was this from the kind of Ba'athist regime of Hafez al-Assad in terms of I know they were very brutal in ways, but you regard them as being more progressive in terms of the rights of women and issues of that nature?
It was much more progressive because the minorities would because he would cooperate with the Christian community to they would make a government. It was like the 30% of the minorities would be in the government structures.
Okay.
That was before the war. That's why Syrian was liberal, because it wasn't a religious country. It was more there was the division of religion and the power. But unfortunately, when I was reading some I don't know how to say it, but some scripts on the government sites that they found out that there's a lot of oil and gas found by Latakia. And gas is like 4 days of reaching the gas out is like 1 year of Kuwait's gas. And it was 2010, and unfortunately they started to put democracy afterwards, 2 months later afterwards. So
this was the Arab Spring kind of uprising, the events that started in Tunisia, wasn't it? Egypt. There was a series of revolutions in various countries. Was when the
and
in Syria started.
Yeah, so I don't think that the revolutionary are putting in democracy like in countries like in Syria was very good. It destroyed the whole country, and letting in the religious groups to helping the religious groups to take over power. That's like a sentence to the minorities, which were effectively killed or had to run away.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that the progressive nature of some aspects of the Assad regime, whereas at the same time one of his closest allies at the end was Iran. So was that alliance with Iran very much an alliance of convenience rather than that they were along the same ideological lines?
Yeah, exactly. It was a line of convenience and cooperation, just the countries between Russia and Iran. And
my enemy's enemy is my friend. He used that English language expression, I think. Common enemy you have. Okay. So what do you think of the recent developments then? Do you believe the group which has taken over power in Syria now will lead Syria in an Islamist direction?
Before I would talk with the Syrian ambassador a couple of years ago, he would say to me that the biggest threat for Syria and the biggest issue is that they don't have borders between Turkish, because all the Islamist ISIS would come for Turkey. And they would send them to Syria to fight, and which destroyed the whole country. Much more harder for the Syrians to attack. If they were raised up together and Syria was a liberal country, so
was foreign fighters introduced from across the border?
A lot, and then who fought and ridiculized the other fighters, and when war gets ugly, it's all the worst things come out. So
when you mentioned Turkey, I think Turkey has been heavily involved in the recent developments, according to news reports.
Unfortunately, because we have to remember that Erdogan said that women should not be allowed to smile on the streets. So we have to think, okay, they're with NATO, but they don't represent the same values that the Western society represents. And he's not for women's rights for sure, and he has a Sunni view on the whole religious case. He wants to may enlarge his Ottoman's empire.
So you think that Erdogan is kind of I think it's well known that he's seeking to expand Turkish influence in terms of their regional kind of footprint, and Erdogan would certainly represent the more conservative aspects of Turkish society. Although that said, I think there's quite liberal elements in Turkish society as well. It's not as if it's
Turks and war. Turkey was a liberal country as well, but there still was, a lot of division again from the power. The religion was divided from the power. But unfortunately, with the Muslim communities, there's a huge risk that they, when somebody who is very radicalized, or you don't know if he's radicalized, when he gets in power, he radicalizes the whole country. And now with the Turkish influence and Al Qaeda, which is a huge terrorist group, getting into power. Of course, they're now rebranding to HTC, and they're now taking over Syria. One of the first steps that they did was taking all the women judges out of the government.
So it's going in the same direction as Afghanistan, effectively, after the victory of the Taliban.
Okay, whatever Syrians would tell you from inside, remember that they are in terror right now. If there's groups that Muslim, Islamic extremists, Al Qaeda terrorists around them, if they would say anything against them, of course they can be killed. So we have to remember that when there was 70% of the society, Sunnis within the Sharia law and the Book of Quran and following Muhammad, they are allowed to lie, to influence and to empower Islam all over the world. So we have to, a lot of times, of course, if they democratically, because there's much more of them, they will put democracy within Syria. Then within the democracy, they can kill all the minorities that are within the democratic vote.
So you believe the recent events then could actually be even worse than the previous regime in terms of
course,
the future for Syria?
Because Christians could only survive at the Assad's regions, and not beside any other regions. So.
And where does the Kurdish question fit into this? The Kurds have been seen as opponents of the Assad regime, and equally the Turks have intervened in northern Syria many times, attacking various Kurdish groups. So, and the Kurds, of course, are split out.
Because Turks hate the Kurds, so that's one thing. Kurds they're more like they want to have their own land, and they are nationalists. But as the Kurds say, you should not trust the new regime that came now along. Well, we need to discuss, excuse me, what's gonna be within the constitution, who can be in power. My prayer is that Christians can, if they want to have a democratic, and they're not going to persecute the Christians, so the Christians should be in power as well, and the other minorities. The constitution should be written in this way. I'm sorry.
No problem. So in Ireland at the moment, a lot of the focus on the Middle East is in the context of the conflict in Gaza, for example. There's an awful lot of criticism, in my opinion, a lot of it very unfair criticism of Israel in this country. And we've had in the last week the announcement by the government of Israel that they're closing their embassy in Dublin due to the policies being pursued by our government, which they view as being anti-Israeli. And the phrase anti-Semitic has also been used. So in the context of the October 7th attacks by Hamas, what is your view of what's happened there and of the response of Israel to it? I think even in recent times, we've seen Israel, expand its buffer zone in the Golan Heights in Syria. Do you believe that Israel is, defending itself appropriately, or how do you view the wider picture in the Middle East?
First of all, I think Israel is defending appropriately the region, and it's actually My interest is in Christians and persecuted Christians, so they would be safe. But I know they are not going to be safe with the terrorist groups and the radical Muslim groups. And I think that Israel is fighting that, and is they're fighting for their people, and they're fighting against the terrorists. So for me, there is a hope that even if Israel will come into Syria, that they could help to develop a constitution that's gonna save the minorities.
Yeah. I think the last similar hope I remember was in Lebanon, I think in 1982, when Israel invaded, and they went almost all the way to Beirut, and they had an alliance with Jamael, not Amin Jamael, but his brother. And there was a peace treaty signed, and there was a hope that there would be kind of an alliance between the Christians of Lebanon and the
Exactly.
Israelis. But
So
that all fell apart.
if we can redo that again, I think that's the biggest hope for Syria, but we actually need at the moment Israel in power, because I really prefer for Israel to take over control than the worst Al Qaeda and terrorist group in the region. And of course we should I hope there is going to be some support for US in this case, and especially because of the human rights, because women's rights, and because of the minorities that are within Syria. It is possible to develop a government that is it's gonna be like in Lebanon, divided with power of with the division of power of all the groups.
And how would you view the stance of organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah in terms of freedom or women's rights? Because I know many liberal
Not fighting for
commentators.
freedom of women's rights. They're just fighting for their ego and the religion. It's not fighting for freedom of women's rights. First of all, as I said at the beginning of the interview, female genital mutilation is not a freedom of women's rights. Telling them to wear burqas, it's not any freedom. It's enslaving them. So it's just sick. A lot of times even Muslim women would call my organization and ask me to help, because they have 4 daughters. They cannot, provide for them. And unfortunately, there's going to be men that are going to buy them and going to rape them. Children. So this is not freedom. If women cannot work, you don't have judges, women judges, it's not freedom. If they cannot, like in Afghanistan, if they cannot speak, if they cannot, even take vitamin D from the sun, they have to be all covered in the heat. They have nothing. The worst, they're nothing. They're, even in prisons, people can breathe normally, and they don't have to cover themselves up. They can speak, but it's a horrific terror.
It's an interesting perspective, given the fact that we hear in this country so much about, promoting human rights in the Middle East. And this is all in the context of attacking and criticizing Israel. This is in Ireland. Whereas in reality, as you're saying, a lot of the human rights challenges are actually on the other side in terms of the stances of these organizations.
Again, and, we have to remember, like Hamas and all those terrorist organizations, they use children and women as human shields. They prefer to kill them because, if they will lose something, and then they have better better reward in their heaven.
It's
If
propaganda
they die,
value.
if they kill, if they're they put their family in threat. It's their
And
way of thinking.
And they have a propaganda leverage as well then to blame Israel for the deaths when they have used human shields, as you say. The other part.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes they just do it by themselves. It's they don't care. They just don't care about women. They're like animals to
And
them. So
do you see Iran as being at the center of this, or do you believe it's too simplistic just to say that, oh, the Iranian regime is the sponsor of a lot of this, that's the most fundamentalist country. If things changed in Iran, things would be better everywhere. Is that too simplistic, or is it the case that Iran really is at the center of all of this?
No, well, there's another fight between the Shias and the Sunnis, of course. Sunni people are a huge community with based in different countries, but they're still all the Muslims from the same religions. And we have Shias and radical Shias in Iran, of course, but hopefully there will be change as well of power within Iran. Iran was before more liberal before the Ayatollah Khomeini came to power.
Yes, I'd actually seen some documentaries and other programs about the rule of the Shah of Iran. And he may have had many faults, but I think he was effectively toppled by the Islamic clergy because of his efforts to effectively modernize and westernize the country. In terms of Iran was moving in a very, very different direction in the 1960s and 70s compared to where it's ended up now.
Yeah, it was. So they were going to modernize. So, but when the religion comes and within all the terror, people just anyone can get killed out of any reason. Because they're not enough of the believers. They're not enough killer. I mean, within the killing, as the Quran is saying, for them to kill, or they're not dying.
It's kind of in certain. If you even look at the history of Europe in the the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, a lot of the conflicts were wars of religion. So it's probably the most primeval and strongest feeling many people have connected to religion. So it's at the heart of many conflicts, I think.
Yeah, of course. So, but we need to remember, with the Muslim communities, there needs to be division of power and religion. And European communities, when it's based on Christianity, we can preserve the value. It is still compatible because it's good values. It teaches people to be good, but Islam doesn't teach people to be good. It teaches people to be very aggressive, very ego-centered, and follow Muhammad. When we read his story, who he was, like a murder, liar, and a pedophile, then we don't want that.
I think in a lot of European countries, there's been a big move away from the influence of Christian values as kind of being condemned and looked down upon in terms of any influence, not even the influence of one particular church, but just the influence of the history of Christianity and Christian values is completely turned away from.
Don't want to be condemned. They don't want the church or religion to interfere in their private life. So the problem with the religion is that it interferes in people's moral decisions. It tries to overjudge the body and the freedom which every person actually has, and Nobody likes that. I don't think anybody likes that. And if you wanna show people how to believe, then I mean, God in real and realistically within the Bible, God gives us freedom.
Mm.
We have freedom of choice and freedom. We are free in what we want to do, and if we believe it or not.
So we're responsible for our own decisions. Basically, we can't say it's
Yeah,
all predestined for us.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So turning to a slightly more optimistic topic, hopefully. I know you're a big fan of Donald Trump, and he's due to return to power on the 20th of January next year. What are your hopes for Trump's second term, especially in the context, say, of Ukraine and what's going on in the world in general?
Uh, I think as he said, he's gonna end the war in Ukraine. We'll see how that goes. But the most risky time is now before he gets into power, because still Biden is the president at the moment. The 20th, he will take over control, and he's making America normal again.
Mm.
Maybe not great, but normal. I'm tired of the woke um, woke community enforcing on children how they should be binary, and
Yeah.
sexualizing children, and I
I had
have a huge hope that he's going to resolve the migration topic. He's going to show how to do it to Europe, because I
mm,
think Europe has, I mean, maybe not Dublin, but Europe has a huge problem now with the migrants, and he's gonna show everybody how to do it properly. You can if you want to, you can.
yeah,
And he's doing
it was a
that.
will to actually do it rather than having an open border like the Biden administration had with Mexico.
Exactly. And excuse me for a second. And yeah, and the open borders, if they came in around, well, it depends on the resources. They came in like 30 million people. You don't know, from what religion, if they're terrorists. You can have guns in the States. And as I read, um the Muslim community, um, within America, is cooperating with Black Lives Matters community, because there's a lot of Muslim within the black community as well, within America. Actually, the most.
And in terms of Ukraine, as someone living in Poland, I know historically speaking, there's been a lot of fear of Russia's future intentions in Poland. Would you have any fears if there was a settlement in Ukraine that it would have any negative implications for Poland's security, or do you believe the threat, if any, from Russia to countries in Eastern Europe, Central Europe, has been exaggerated?
I think for Poland, I mean, our politics should be very wise, and I'm afraid, what our government will do, and if they're going to be wise enough not to get involved in this war. We absolutely don't. I mean, Polish people absolutely don't want to be involved in the war. We don't want to be second Ukraine, and but we just hope the government won't say too much words, and showing how much their power they have, because we really don't want to be second Ukraine, as Poles. We are the country who helped as much as we can. We brought in like 10 million Ukrainians within our area, a huge amount. And with the places of living. We helped with any kind of way the Ukrainians that we could. And but still, we don't want to end up as Ukraine.
So you think
the
best solution may well be to freeze the conflict, acknowledge the fact that Russia has occupied.
Want that because they're afraid that Russia will get into power. I heard solutions that Trump was saying that he's gonna just give appropriate weapons to the Ukrainians, but I don't want any weapons to go from our territory. I think, like in this case, Poland should wave a flag and not be associated with the war. But we helped a lot already. We saved millions of Ukrainians. We took them into our homes, took care of them, gave them a lot of money. So gave him jobs and everything. So of course,
you believe Poland has done its share in terms of the Ukrainian conflict, would be a summary of your views.
Yeah, and we got most of the weapons that we bought were for the Ukrainians. So everything, we did really much, and we would like President Zelensky to be appreciative of what we done. Unfortunately, sometimes he's not. Which Polish people are really don't feel right with it.
And historically, there's been a lot similar to the relationship probably between Britain and Ireland. Historically, there has been a lot of tension in relations between Poland and Ukraine, and probably lots of bad things done, possibly on both sides even. But it's not always been the warmest of relationships.
Well, look, we're not doing anything wrong with the Ukrainians. Ukrainians eventually done wrong to Polish people. They still didn't apologize for Volyn, but still, we're not a country that will go, and we are a country that loves to help others.
Yes,
but first we need to think about helping ourselves, and it's going too much.
So as we move towards the conclusion of the interview, Miriam, is it fair to say you have maybe better hopes for 2025 than for recent years, given the new administration in the US, given the direction that some things are going in the world that look to be maybe slightly more positive? So do you have better hopes for next year?
Of course, with Donald Trump within power, of course, I have much more hope. I think America would be destroyed if Donald Trump didn't go into power, and there would be hell on earth. And World War III would actually come to pass if he wouldn't win the elections. But now there's hope for normality, and I just hope that there's going to be hope for normality as well in Europe, and that Donald Trump is going to help over here as well to bring in the normality over here to Europe.
That's been an absolutely fascinating kind of perspective on, especially on the Middle East, especially on the events in Syria. So thank you so much for very in-depth analysis of the current situation across a huge range of fields. And hopefully we will speak again in the future. So our guest this evening was Miriam Shaded from Warszawa, and do zobaczenia, Miriam.
Thank you for listening and inviting me over.